Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to start this week's devlog by resolving that nail-biting cliffhanger from last week. So if you recall, last week I ended by importing animation for Betty here into Unity. The problem was that her weapon-holding animations and her regular walking and run animations didn't want to coexist together, and I thought I was going to have to do a whole lot more animation. Fortunately, I put on my thinking cap and fixed the problem without having to do any more animation. This solution will also reduce the amount of animation I have to do in the future too, as I add more items for the characters to hold. The basic problem was this. When Betty's hips rotate as she walks and runs, her torso needs to rotate in the opposite direction to compensate so her body remains upright. That is in fact what is happening when she's walking and running. Her torso twists in the opposite direction as the hip. However, when she's holding a weapon, I need to override her torso animation because she needs to twist her torso to aim things like the rifle and melee weapons. That worked fine while she was standing idle, because her hips don't rotate, but when she's moving, her torso no longer compensated for the rotation. So the solution was pretty simple actually, just placing a pivot between her hips and her torso, which does the work of the hip rotation compensation. The pivot doesn't need to be overwritten for weapon animation, so the torso itself is free to rotate and twist as it needs without having to worry about the hip rotation. Next thing I wanted to work on was making sure the UI elements weren't getting blocked by objects in the scene. So you can see here, even as the tree gets rotated between myself and the UI still gets displayed on top of the tree. The same applies for the aimer, which is literally just a white ball floating in the scene. So I spent a lot of time last night playing around with cartoon cel-shaded shaders, and I do like the look of it. There is one problem with this, in particular because I'm using a voxel style here, is that cartoon outline shaders don't really like boxes. You can see here on the corners, and if you get right in line with the edge there, you can see that the outline actually is just outside of the object. But I think I might have found a workaround here for that. Let me show you here. You can see the corners are better here, and I kind of like the look of that, so I'm gonna try and see how that looks with the rest of my stuff here. So I'm really happy with how it looks right now. I feel like doing that added a lot of style to the game. Though for some reason when I built out the scene, the big rocks didn't render their outlines. I'm not sure what happened there. But otherwise, I think it's a huge improvement. Unfortunately, that sucked up all my spare time tonight. I had a couple of things I wanted to scratch off the to-do list, but I guess that'll have to wait. I probably won't get much, if any, time to work on the game tomorrow. The next thing I wanted to do was make a quick switch for the inventory system using the D-pad. Left and right cycling through the weapons, and then up and down cycling through the secondary items. But at the same time, I plan on making some changes to the controller interface, so it doesn't really make sense to add any new controls until I do that. So you can see here I've got this voxel controller. Right now the game can take input from PS4 and Xbox One controllers, but I want to be able to take input from any controller that has the same basic inputs. I'll be using this model for a number of things. For one, if you have a controller the game doesn't recognize, it will allow you to configure your controller. It will highlight a button and wait for you to press the corresponding button on your controller and save your configuration. Additionally, the game will bring up one of these controller displays with the highlighted button to indicate you can do something, like interacting with an object or closing the inventory. This is going to be especially useful because I won't have to worry about knowing whether the user has an Xbox or PS4 or other type of controller. I don't have to worry about the game saying press B or press circle. I can literally just show you what button to press. This is even more important because players will be wearing headsets, so they can't just look down at their controller to see where the B button is. Last night I spent all night working on getting the controller to recognize input and display it. I want to create an additional layer of separation between the input and the game as well, to allow for remapping of controls in-game. It is now Saturday morning, and we're coming to the end of the week. Last night I worked on the ability to reconfigure controls. So you can see here I've got my Xbox One controller hooked up, but I've disabled the auto setup for it, so the buttons don't all match up. But if I reconfigure, it will go through each button and wait for an input, and it will then map that input to the button. On the bottom you can see it's remapping buttons and axes. And once I've gone through all that, the buttons now all match up. The only thing I'm not sure of is how I want to indicate to the player to configure the analog stick's X versus their Y axis. So you can see here in my inventory I've got an axe, a pistol, and the hunting rifle. And now I've got it so you can use the D-pad to quick swap your inventory. So if you don't have anything equipped, it's just going to default to whatever is in your first slot there. So in this case it's her axe, and then I can just cycle through. By pressing right it'll cycle forward, and pressing left it'll cycle back. So I'm on the axe, so if I cycle back now should go to the rifle, and then to the pistol, and then back to the axe. So I've got that all working for the primary weapons here, and I just need to do the same thing for all these secondary items. So that'll be what I do now. Well, that's going to do it for this week's devlog. In next week's devlog, I'm hoping to take some time and explain a little bit more what the plan is as far as playable test builds and all that. But I am shooting to have a playable test build ready by the end of February or the start of March, so tune in next week to find out more.